Welcome to Cognitive Vigilance Podcast. I am here with Rin and the infamous Jeremy Kaufman. Is it okay to call you infamous? I think you're kind of infamous, right?
Whether you want to attach the "in" to the front is a choice.
Want to give a little, synopsis on who you are, what you do, kind of your vibe, why people on Twitter like you or hate you, depending on what side of the coin they're on.
I do like to give some perspectives that then aren't always given, but honestly, like I'm mostly a pretty normal person. Like I just had a nice family dinner at my house with some other parents. We just had like four families over my house for dinner, just kids running around. It's like I live a very Twitter is like the only place my life is exciting, like it's
you have, I like stalked you a little bit. Do you have
okay.
two master's degrees?
I have zero master's
Wait,
degrees.
I thought you said you had a master's degree. Did I make
I
that up?
I am technically a PhD dropout.
Oh,
But I
okay.
have I have two degrees. I regret to mention that I have degrees, but I do have two degrees. They were in physics and computer science.
Did they do anything for
But
you?
college was a good experience. I'm actually probably pro college on the balance. I think some of the things that you could do some of that stuff earlier, but you gotta learn to grow up. I mean, college is a good chance. I think college is a good chance for people to learn to grow up to the extent
Mm-hmm.
that college still allows that to happen. My understanding is that college is less and less letting students do that. But like I was in college, I was renting my own property. At 19, I had to start cooking my own meals. These are things that are very healthy things to happen. And for me, those things happen in college. I think colleges do that less and less now. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was in a sorority in college, and people, I think, have bad taste in their mouth about like Greek life and all that stuff. But it was an amazing experience for me because it taught me
No,
how to adult and
no, it's
like
just good.
how to run a business and all of these different skills.
You hang out with libertarians now, and libertarians just don't like people who are roughly normal socially. So it's like if you're in a sorority, you probably had like a bunch of friends, and therefore libertarians aren't going to like you. So
Brandy is queen of the libertarians just because it just
Yeah,
rolls
I'm the
in
only
with.
libertarian you know.
You've introduced me to so many of them now, and actually, a lot of the ones you introduced me to are fairly socially adjusted, but a lot of the ones I meet in the wild, that's maybe not quite the case.
Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
not socially adjusted, so don't mistake it for.
don't get
Love
your
that.
hopes up. Well, so one thing I brought Jeremy on here to talk about, one of the main things. There's a few things that I have, and I don't even know where to start right now. I'm like, actually, you know what? We're gonna start off with a clip
Okay.
of something that you've probably seen it. I don't know if Rin probably hasn't seen it, but I
Okay.
have I wanted to know how you felt about this because I know that
Um,
you're someone that
I mean, you would never
believes in
put me on the
science.
spot.
I
Small ass
found this
science.
clip to be
A
extremely
small
interesting.
s, yes,
Take a listen.
not
One of my habits now is ignoring all data. It's great. I love when people come to me and say, actually, we've got the data to prove. To prove what, you little What are you going to prove to me? I can prove to you that the ice caps are melting. There's ice in my water right now. I'm going to leave the water unattended until the ice melts. Will the water overflow out of the cup? No. Why are all the richest, most important people in the world who are pushing this scam buying beachfront homes? Oh, but the data says. The data's from the Matrix, and you are the Matrix, and the Matrix is full of lies. Anyone who actually analyzes data nowadays proves they're a dumbass. Have you seen that graph thing, that meme where you have the most stupid people and the most intelligent people do the same thing? And then you have the midwit in the middle. Data is for midwits. Well, the data says. Yeah, the data says. Well, actually, I guess statistically. The pharmaceutical company who sells the jab made the data. Why are you even reading it? Why are you reading it? There were stupid people who sat there and said, the jab's made of 5G cellular data. And then there was extremely intelligent people like me who said, I don't trust these motherfuckers. And we both didn't get the jab. All the people in the middle were like, well, the data says, and the news said. They wouldn't just make us all take a jab for no reason. Jabby jab, jabby jab. If you even look at data nowadays, you're a dumbass. You should just know. Street smart people don't need data. We've just been around. You know? I've just been around. I just know things because I've just been around.
Honestly, that is so relatable to me. I can't even explain it. I just know things because I've been around, because there are so many scenarios I find myself in where I'm unable to articulate the point. I'm unable to articulate the natural reaction that I have when somebody tries to sell me garbage. I can't articulate it when somebody explains to me, well, the moon landings definitely happened because this, and the firmament, and they could get, and I'm just like, no, I don't know. Instinctually, it just doesn't register to me. It just feels like that is a lie.
So,
I like that casual just pairing the moon landing to flat Earth in the same sense. Really just throwing the spaghetti on the
How
wall.
does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's like, like many things, there's a sort of Aristotelian golden mean here. Like, obviously, first of all, they prove themselves wrong on the face of it. They obviously consider data, because whether wealthy people buy houses on the beach is data. That's data. That's evidence.
Yeah.
That is something you can statistically measure. What % of wealthy people are abiding the purported claims of global warming versus what number of them are buying houses on the beach? Measuring that is data. That's what data is. Now, should we also use our intuitions? Absolutely, we should. We should not necessarily let data override our intuitions, which is what I think, to be charitable to what they're saying. They're saying is, don't let data override your intuitions. And I think that is often true, that we shouldn't let data override our intuitions. Our intuitions are very powerful, but the idea that we should only trust our intuitions is also clearly ridiculous, right? Like, there are plenty of, and we can contrive, we don't even need to contrive things. We can come up with existing examples where our intuitions about how the world or reality work are incorrect. And it is data that allows us, to do these things. Right? So, like, I'm not using a credential here, but one of the reasons I got a degree in physics was because I found this classic experiment. It's called Young's double slit experiment. It's this idea about whether when you observe photons, whether you measure the photons or not, they appear to behave differently. I'm not going to explain the whole experiment unless you really want me to, although I can. But the point is, like, they're counterintuitive things. Like, evolution to me is a correct fact. It's not the most intuitive thing to get, but you look at enough evidence for it and it becomes true. And so this idea that we should only trust our intuitions, I think is like clearly a false idea. This idea that we should always believe evidence and always believe experts is, of course, also wrong. So I'm not defending that position either. But this idea that data and evidence don't matter is also clearly is clearly ridiculous. So yeah, I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that in the slightest.
Yeah, I just saw so it was funny because when I saw that video, I also saw a study that came out that said a new study from a team of scientists at the University of Minnesota finds that higher IQ siblings tend to be more politically liberal than their lower IQ brothers and sisters, and polygenic scores for IQ predict liberalism even better than do IQ tests. And then I kind of like went into this, and there's another study that said something similar, but it was more so based on social conservatism, not like people who favor free market economics. Like, it's not so much fiscal conservative, but social conservatives seem to like correlate with.
I mean, I always get really I'm like always nervous when people start. Like, IQ is a useful tool, but not like a perfect measurement.
Oh, Jeremy loves this measurement though.
I mean, it's useful.
It is useful.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I would never claim it's a perfect measurement. Obviously, I far exceed my IQ. I mean, I think that's clear. So it's obviously we all exceed our IQs. So it's clearly an imperfect measurement. No. Look, there's no measurement that is ever perfect for measuring anything. I mean, this is Actually, this is a funny story. There's a law that I like to cite, which is this law that it's called. What is the name of the law? As soon as a metric becomes a target, it ceases to become a good metric. Like the idea is that things that are good metrics, like once we start to optimize, the metrics are always imperfect. So if you optimize for the metric, you're doing something flawed. Metrics can only be measurements. And there's an economist who invented this law, or sorry, who's credited with coming up with this law. And I'm really embarrassed that I can't remember his name right now. But I cited this law in a talk at a Free State Project event. And this guy came up to me after the event. He's like, I'm the grandson of that economist. I'm so glad that you met. I'll look it up real quick.
But I think that attitude actually holds true for a lot of what is happening. Like when people like even now, and you're like, I've seen a
Goodhart's law. Yeah. Well, but the thing is, you have to be able to study things, and so this is the problem. Like you can't. You're not going to be able to get direct evidence for all of your beliefs about the world. Like you will have to trust experts. There are experts that I trust. I trust I trust Tom Woods, for example. Like if Tom Woods is telling me something, there are things that I consider Tom Woods to be an expert at that I don't have expertise at. And so if Tom Woods tells me something, my initial reaction to something that he tells me is that his claims are credible because he has a track record of being credible based off of the things that I understand. So like everyone's going to have experts. Everyone's going to have people that they look to in their lives. This idea, what people are saying is like, you could probably find tweets in my own history where I'm like, don't trust the experts. So I'm not trying to even disparage that kind of phrasing. But what people I think are really saying when they say this is they're saying, don't trust the existing credential regime. Don't trust the existing way that authorities are produced. That the mechanisms we are supposed to trust to produce authority figures have become corrupted and flawed. And I think this is a very credible claim. And I think, but the idea that expertise itself doesn't exist is obviously false, right? We all have people we turn to in our lives for expertise on various subject matter. And so obviously expertise exists and we all trust experts. What the problem is, the people who are held up as experts in our society are these fake experts, these sort of fake elites who didn't earn their positions and can't credibly be trusted. And that's I think what people are saying, but it is like good to unpack it and explain it a little bit.
I mean, there are aspects of, so I agree with generally with everything you've said. Although I do think like I'm probably going to be a lot less, judgmental of experts in certain positions, especially along like government structure and stuff. But you can have an expert who has an opinion that might be right in a certain context. But the problem is that, like you're like, oh, we need to do this thing. Even economists will be like, we have to do this. And another economist who has a totally different opinion will be like, we have to do this. In certain structures, both of those things will probably work in whatever model they're thinking of or however they're valuing certain things. And then, you trust one, you give them 4 years to give it a go. It doesn't work. So then you go to the other one, you give them 4 years, it doesn't work. And everyone is just like, well, the experts are all fucking. And then, you have everybody who's trying actively to make whatever they're doing not work. So
yeah, well, I will say, but this brings it back to why I think ultimately we do need to have a belief in data. Like we can't develop, like this idea of becoming anti-data itself, I think is crazy. Like we can be skeptical of the data, we can be skeptical of the interpretation, the collection, whatever. I think skepticism is very healthy, but the way that we can ultimately determine truth is by measuring things. Like the scientific method itself is something I will defend till I die. This idea that we formulate a hypothesis, we collect data to determine whether it's true or not. This is a very sound methodology for determining, what's true in the world. And so I think
preaching to the choir, and I love it. But the problem is, in order for the scientific method to work and all the institutions that go with it, you have to be willing to be wrong. Like,
of course. Of course, and I think obviously we have big problems at this point with a whole bunch of pieces of the apparatus. So who's collecting the data? The idea that who's performing the studies? What are the incentives? We have all of these problems. With sort of either things being literally faked or just selection effects where the 10 people who get a null result don't publish, and the one person who gets a positive result does publish. And so like we should be very, very skeptical of these sort of scientific claims, because people want to use science because whatever works, people who have bullshit are going to want to drape their bullshit in what works. And so because science works, we've now, found all these people who want to drape themselves in science. And obviously there is a lot of bullshit out there, but the core principles of science are very good, and we shouldn't let go of them because they're correct.
No, I fully agree. I mean, it's interesting thinking about the areas where like food science and like dieting and things like that is so just like bloated with a bunch of people who have no interest in saying the true things. They just want to sell something. But then you have like, I don't struggle to find, good studies in chemistry making new molecules, right? Even drug users and there's a whole bunch of at-home chemists doing good scientific research and publishing that in like nebulous places, but it's still holding up to the rigors of science because they're just like, they're more interested in the learning than the outcome. And
yeah, well, similar to libertarianism, I've actually found that good science, like good libertarianism, is like kind of a psychological selection, and a lot of people just don't have the psychology. And I don't, by the way, mean to say that here in any way they're the same thing, but because I've met people with good science psychology with all kinds of political persuasions, and I've met, and vice versa or whatever. But yeah, this is like. Science is, I do think it's sort of, you have to be kind of autistic or something to do it well. Like you have to, a lot of human truth seeking, and then maybe here there is an overlap, but like truth seeking for most people is so consensus based and this kind of thing. And like good science is the opposite of that. But even science itself, ends up being very consensus. I mean, this is the classic book by Thomas Kuhn, The Theory of like Science, the Scientific Revolutions, which I think is probably true. Like science itself gets hidebound and doesn't want to progress, and so even clear scientific truths. I think tectonic plates is a classic example of this, but there are others. The structure of the atom took time. Where people just even scientists can't be very scientific. And so, I think the lesson of all this is that humans are, for good evolutionary reasons, very tribal thinkers. It's very hard to get us to be sound reasoners. Science attempts to get us to do this, but it's very hard. And it's very hard even for people who are, quote, scientists to do this.
Brandy, you and I have talked about this a bit. One of the things that I appreciated about my science background and education was I had a whole semester that was just learning how to basically read shitty papers and tell what was good, and learn how to, it was almost a taught skill to be like, oh, I have this idea, I think this is a good paper, and then someone basically tears it apart, and I need to not get upset about that, but rather be thankful. It's a whole condition. It feels very similar to the conditioning that firefighters get to overcome their instinct to run into a fire. You always want to this is my idea, I want to defend this, I'm right, you're wrong. And letting go of that is a for me, it was a learned skill.
Yeah, no one likes to be wrong.
Right. But
that
when
doesn't feel good.
When you get to a point where you're happy to be proven wrong, then you can really do some great things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like many things, I think it's a mix. I think it is something that people look. Yeah, I think it is something that's taught for most people. But I think there's still a variety. There's still a variation in sort of who can learn the lesson. And so there are some people for whom the sort of ideas of science click, and there are other people that aren't. That's not going to be true for. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to teach them to everyone. I agree. I think we should. The ideas are true and correct, and we should try to teach them to everyone. But I think also it just is true. I mean, how would we, if we could just teach people the scientific method in high school and they would just go around and apply it, we wouldn't in a real way, we wouldn't be where we are, and so to me, if we're going to be realistic, I don't know, the percentage of people who can really be relatively truth-seeking, I've got it pretty low, 5 to 10%, maybe even lower than both of those numbers. Maybe it's only a couple of percent. The percentage of the population that could be a good scientist yeah, I've got it at like 5%. Like this isn't something that it's going to be hard to just teach. Like people just aren't going to be able to apply it. They can be taught that it's true. Like everyone understand. This is a controversial claim. This is maybe a good direction for this conversation. Because like the evolution, I think evolution is very interesting. Because like everyone knows that evolution is true. Right?
Does
like
everyone? There are definitely people that do not believe in evolution.
But they have to get to
Candace
this sort
Owens is one.
But that's a second level of education. So that's a great example where our intuitions don't match the data. The data for evolution is so strong that you've gotta. I think you've got to say, well, my intuitions might be wrong here. But why do people believe evolution is true? Like most people can't really get it. Like they can't. They've just been told it. They've been told it in the same way that like people have an inclination to religiosity. So if you stripped them of Christianity, they would reinvent gods, but they wouldn't reinvent Jesus Christ specifically, right? I think, I don't know. That's not trying to make this but like that's, so this is, this sort of dynamic is like very much so how do you deal with this, because people aren't really persuaded that evolution is correct, they're just told to believe it, but it's true, but it is true that evolution is correct.
So but you're talking a little bit about like I think we could teach, because I as somebody who studied Evo Devo, I can walk people through how you can like come to the proof of evolution fairly easily with a basic understanding of biology and what's happening, but it's not practical knowledge for most people. And so like I do think we undereducate and we get to a point where we tell people a lot of facts. Like I think
I was gonna say, do you believe in dinosaurs? Because that's like the new topic is that
Of course.
dinosaurs didn't exist. Have you heard this?
Are we arguing that dinosaurs?
There are people that it's like
were they put there by the
all over
devil?
Twitter. I don't know. I think it was made up.
understanding.
They think that like I don't know what the point of the conspiracy for dinosaurs to be. I think it is that they want to believe, they're trying to convince us that the Earth is
6,000
not
years
as
old.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah, like-
argument I've ever heard for that was a religious one that is a very which
No,
is
it's making a comeback because my mom.
it's making a
went
comeback
through
because
this
of
when I was
trolls.
younger.
I have to believe.
No.
Well, no, it's making a comeback because of the exact reasoning that was given by Kant. Like like evolution does not match our intuitions, and so there is a pressure in the same way that that gravity exists. There's a pressure pulling us away from the truth, because the truth, and this is true for a number of facts, where the truth about the world does not match our intuitions, and so it will take either it takes specific teaching, or we're going to drift away from the truth, because like evolution does not incentivize the truth. Right. This is, I think anyone who believes in evolution would agree with this, that evolution does not incentivize the truth. Maybe it does. I'm not saying it doesn't directionally, but there's clearly times where it would be evolutionary beneficial for me to believe on true things. And so, I think that this is a huge.
Yeah. Can you
How would
elaborate
it be?
on that?
Yeah. How would it be evolutionarily beneficial to believe untrue things? I guess I don't see a correlation there.
If I am born into a tribe and my tribe believes fact X, and believing that fact X is false results in death or harm to myself, then and that does not describe our evolutionary history.
So,
like this is what we're like. Look, we have to grapple with the fact that we have evolved under a context which very much encouraged us to believe tribal facts and tribal truths, and this drives so much of our cognition, so much of our perceptions about the world are mediated by these sort of tribal evolutionary behaviors, where our tribe believes fact X or disbelieves fact. These are the positions our tribe takes, and we're wired to go with the tribe on any kind of claim like this.
I mean, I do agree with that, but I would even make an argument further where humans, as a modern, being, we've removed ourselves from the kind of classic evolutionary mechanisms. Like we no longer. Like we evolved into a tribal species, and then eventually, we very rapidly removed ourselves from the classic levers of evolution. And now,
not our DNA though. Like we've removed ourselves from those realities, but we're still programmed
I agree with
by
that. We are effectively still like very
Yeah.
similar genetically to the thing we were 200,000 years ago, and we're catching up to a very rapidly evolving society, and our biology does not keep up. Like we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think. I think we're. I think the last 10,000 years are also very important in terms of humans' evolutionary history because they were.
Agricultural revolution.
Yeah, but yes, but otherwise, I essentially agree with you. Yeah.
So to me, it's interesting when we talk about like arguing about evolution for other animals versus humans. I think we're very much influenced by our evolutionary past, but now we're no longer a kind of like the variance among 8-9 billion individual entities that have so many different kinds of like mechanism levers and like all sort of like there's so many different tribes. So even if you get into kind of like the ethnic heritages and kind of like what people are good at and what people are bad at and those kinds of like historical things, you have so many I don't know how to use that in a meaningful way other than to acknowledge that it exists and there's data and trends. Like to me, you almost get into a rabbit hole where it's like, is this a useful dialogue?
Well, I think it's incredibly useful because I think it explains so many things that are otherwise inexplainable. It explains.
Can you give examples of that?
Differences in gender outcomes, differences in race outcomes. It explains political outcomes. It explains all kinds of things. I think. Yeah.
But can you all right? So like again, you can have trends and you can have data, but are you going to use that in a meaningful way to pass laws?
Oh, well, past laws. I mean, maybe. I mean, in the sense that I think like we have to understand these things. I mean, to me, I think I
agree with understanding.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I have no specific vision for what your ideal system is. I mean, I do think you're going to need tests. Whether there's tests, I think because our genes aren't ultimately deterministic. I don't think you want tests that are using genetics to determine. Like, I don't think Gattaca is the proper future. Because I think you can judge the sort of emergent result of a person. But I do think it's very important that we throw away, sort of blank slate egalitarianism, which we do have some evolutionary impulses to believe is true. Like I had impulses that this was, much more true than it was, that I sort of cognitively and consciously threw away. And so I think that, but I think that this stuff is very important to recognize, and it is important for politically, because if it turns out that these things that we're not blank slates in our politics, then it does affect, sort of how we do things politically.
I have a question because I know you use the word egalitarian a lot, and I feel like a lot of people use that word and they mean something differently when they say it. So what do you mean when you say egalitarian?
That basically people are two things: either that people are born as blank slates, although I'll tend to say blank slate more than egalitarian for that, and then that people have equal moral worth.
Well, that's a Christian idea.
Well,
Wait, can you either of you explain the concept of equal moral worth?
Well, morally equal before God. I mean, that it is a Christian idea. I don't. It didn't really exist before Christianity, and I'll make that argument all day.
I find it interesting because you get Christians at very much both ends of this spectrum. Although I think I'd love to hear you argue with a Christian on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not equipped to argue that, but I do think it's funny. As someone who doesn't, can see both sides of that argument and don't have a strong position. That's Nietzsche's argument, right? That Christianity is a sort of slave morality or whatever. And at times that seems true to me, and at times it seems the opposite. And I see Christianity as like the only thing holding back the slave morality. So, wait, sorry, I lost the question. There's a question I was supposed to answer and I forgot.
Well, I was just asking what egalitarianism was. What were you asking, Ren?
I'm trying to understand the base concept of like blank equal morality, is because it feels like to me that it's up in the air that the life of a person, of different people, could be worth more.
Yeah, how many homeless people, like, think of the trolley problem or something, so you've got the trolley problem, and like whoever you regard as a hero is on one side, maybe it's Elon Musk, maybe it's Kamala Harris, I don't know. Whoever your hero is on one side of the tracks, and on the other side it's just like bums.
Yeah,
How
but what
many-
if it's your
what's your-
family and
but-
Elon Musk on
but-
the other side?
Well, of course, I'm not sure. Well, the point is, of course, your family is more important to you than Elon Musk. But the point is, like, but the more egalitarian you get, the more universalist you're going to get. The more you're going to say that a random person in China is the same as my neighbor or Elon Musk or whoever. And Elon Musk is a hero to me, but he might not be a hero to you. But so when I say Elon Musk, I mean a hero to someone personally. Like, what's your sort of, to the extent that you're ever forced to be put in positions where you're forced to trade off these kinds of things, what's your sort of exchange rate? Most people don't even like thinking that way. But this is, we have moral differences in our judgments, and the more egalitarian you are, the more you sort of view people as equal things, regardless, as equal regardless.
So I think that this is where, so in like a religious aspect, which I know that you're not, I think that thinking that people are equal before God does not mean that they are still equal. Does that make? I don't know if that makes.
Well, that's
sense.
right. That's why. Yeah. Well, it's like, are we equal before the law, or are we equal?
But that actually is the one that's more interesting to me, because the law, as it structures in the United States now, tends to favor the Elon Musks over the 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 bums.
That could be debated. Right?
Sure.
Elon,
But
Elon Musk. Yeah.
Do you think the law should be egalitarian?
Should I? So
Or
if
at
the
least
sense is, it's sorry, okay.
Do you believe the law should be applied to people equally? Like, do you think Elon Musk, if he committed murder and Hobo on the Street committed murder, it was the same crime, they should both be treated the exact same?
I see those as different claims. I would lean towards the second one, but not towards the first one.
What do you mean?
So wait, so let me make sure I'm understanding them both correctly.
Mhm.
So the second claim is, should there be equality under the law?
Yeah.
Should the law apply equally? And then but that I don't think was the first claim. The first claim was, can you repeat it?
I thought
Or
we
you're
were
asking
making the
me-
same claim. So
What-
I
So
wanted
is
to-
that
Okay.
is that what you
Okay.
meant, Rin?
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
because basically, like, the law should not see people differently regardless of whatever moral value they have or do not have.
I would support the law judging people equally, but I don't think that that does not imply that the law should be produced in an egalitarian fashion.
Okay, elaborate on the differences.
So like I would support a system in which the rules are applied consistently, sort of regardless of the stature of the person that the rules are being applied to. Although I think that's probably going to be difficult to produce regardless. But let's say purist wise, I endorse that direction. I think that I definitely do not endorse a sort of system of laws or rules that would be produced by what the average person would find to be agreeable.
I see. So you don't want the laws to be made by
Yeah.
you don't think the average person should have the same voice as people who are clearly trained or bred or whatever to be leaders.
I'm very I'm very open-minded on what the right way you produce the law is. I think that's sort of an unsolved problem. I generally believe that we want more competition in the same way that we have competition between companies. We would want competition between how things are governed, and we can ultimately discover the best forms of government. But I'm very much persuaded that democracy does not produce the kinds of government that I myself would like. And I think that there are millions of people like myself who also dislike the outcomes of democracy. And so clearly, I mean, I guess it's not clear. I'll actually even retract the word clearly. But one would hope that there is a system out there that does better than this one.
But we haven't. I think that that's kind of the problem, is that I don't know if there is a system. Because even if we get down to like covenant communities and all of these things, like, isn't there a certain level of democracy that would be used to make decisions? Like,
Yeah,
on a small
yeah.
scale, democracy is kind of inevitable.
Certainly there would be at least be systems where like many people are going to have a say. I don't know that it becomes literally one man, one vote, but yeah, of course, there's nothing wrong with this. Like, in fact, this is literally the only solution. Like, we differ in our moral judgments and our moral values. Unless we want to literally have a war of all against all, the only reasonable solution is local variety. It's the only reasonable solution. If we accept that there is no, now, I mean, there are people who are sort of complete moral objectivists who would say, well, my moral vision is correct for everyone, and therefore everyone, we should be pushing everyone towards this vision. I'm a bit less that way. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's true, sometimes I think it's not, but basically it just seems to me that people just have these really sincere differences, and that it would be much healthier if we could find ways of sort of sorting ourselves out and selecting ourselves into various mechanisms, and I certainly find there to be plenty of systems in which I have no say whatsoever. Like, I have no say in how, Chipotle is run or how McDonald's is run. But I find that if I go into those places, they often treat me better, than the DMV, which technically speaking, I have a say in the DMV, in how the DMV is run. I get to go in and vote,
What's your cable provider?
I have Xfinity, Comcast, whatever they're.
And have you found that their customer experience is better than RCN or worse than any other cable provider?
I have, they've gotten a lot. They've gotten better. Yeah, no, well, like, it is like, this isn't a claim that all corporations outperform all government. Obviously, it's about competition, right? And so when we lose competition, whether it's a private entity or a government entity, we can expect worse results. And so really it's about how can you have frameworks that maintain competition. And you could probably convince, like I'm not someone who's going to, I have directionally purist instincts, but I'm not someone who's going to bite every bullet. Like, ultimately, we care about outcomes. We want, a world in which humans are thriving and flourishing. And so, we can contrive hypotheticals where we're probably going to be comfortable breaking various principles or whatever. And this is why directionally, it's
Are
good.
you a pragmatist, Jeremy?
I kind of actually am a pragmatist, which is why it's so bothering that I had to, wage a multi-year campaign against the pragmatists who theoretically control the libertarian party.
Do you have answers to monopolies in libertarianism? I don't know what that, how.
Oh my gosh.
Helps.
Yes, I mean there are, but.
Well, what's the kind of monopoly? I mean, the thing is, like, what's the
a dual system monopoly is really a difficult thing to defeat in my mind to a low regulation.
Aren't most
government.
monopolies created because of the government creates a lot of them? There's probably examples of that, of a monopoly just happening naturally, of but I can't think of many. Most of them get subsidized by the government. Do you have give me an example, because even the railways, when they were monopolies, weren't they all just being subsidized, and there was a bunch of political corruption that was going on? What?
Well, I mean, I guess the problem would be moving from our current system of lots of bloat and subsidies to pure libertarianism without leveling the playing field.
That's the problem. Well,
right.
Yeah.
So how do you so I don't know how to even have a conversation with a libertarian without how do we undo the history of these megaliths that already exist? It's the same dialogue when people talk about wanting to cut off.
I mean, I actually think we've seen a decent amount. It's not like the richest companies in America have been at the top of the stock market for 100 years. I mean, we've actually seen a decent amount of dynamicism. A lot of the largest American companies were founded 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or 20 years ago. It's who are the most powerful American companies? Apple and Google. I mean, you do see some that are older than that. I'm not going to say it's all the new ones, but this idea that I just think it's false. I mean, and this is under a sort of restricted version of capitalism, right? This is under a system in which it's often the large corporations who are being friendly with government and using the government to protect their incumbency.
Yeah, I could
Well,
see an
yeah.
argument for like regulatory capture, like companies that will try to lobby to push regulations in their direction so
But-
that, you know,
But generally, the major problem is what's the system that will produce out like even if you can come up with some theoretical example where like, and I'm not saying there can't be monopolistic, like that there couldn't be some theoretical monopoly example. It's what's the system that will prevent this, more in general, because it's certainly not democracy, right? Like, so if you're going to theorize that there's going to be some government that will act as this check against the monopolists, I think you need to be very specific as to what that system will be and what will look like and why that would outperform, competition. So even if competition has some monopoly rate, even if, 1 out of 100 domains, humans are stuck in monopoly for 30% of the time, whatever, like what's your system and how is it going to do better? Because we often end up in monopolistic like outcomes, under American democracy, or all kinds of inferior outcomes. And so you have to ultimately compare your system, whatever it produces, to the other one and compare the results.
Jeremy, I have a question.
Yeah.
I made a poll and I wanted to see what your answer was. What do you think's worse, democracy or bureaucracy?
Well, they're very related. Like ultimately, I'm somewhat of a consequentialist here. Like, this is like, I feel the same way about like who should have a right to vote. It's like, look, if it was a bunch of white men who were making America worse from how I wanted, I would say we shouldn't let white men vote. It's democracy is bad because we know that it's bad because we've seen the results. Like,
but when you say democracy, I guess this has always been my problem when people just say democracy is bad. Because when I think of democracy, isn't it just like, it's like majority rule basically, right? But like on a small scale, that's kind of how anything would operate. What's the other option? I guess I don't see what the other option is other than democracy.
Well, so to me, the best example,
dictatorship.
So that's what David Friedman says is the ideal form of government. He says it's competitive dictatorship, where you have no say what's on the menu, but you have every say in where you eat, which is how restaurants work. Right? Restaurants are a competitive dictatorship. You don't generally, you're not given any say whatsoever in how the restaurant that you visit operates. You only are given a choice as to whether you would like to eat there. Yet you're treated very well, right? When you go into how you're treated in a restaurant is generally better than how you're treated by government officials. All right, but you have more say in how the government is run than you have in how the restaurant is run. The only say you have in how the restaurant is run is whether you visit it or not.
But restaurants don't have the power to stop you from leaving.
Well, right. And so this gets into, I'm very much not a universalist. So I will accept. So this is something that's come up with in my conversations with Brandy about like whether it's okay that, people would be born into some like hyper repressive religious regime and they're indoctrinated into this or whatever. And so to me, it's like one of the few universalizable rights that I think you have to kind of accept is that people have to be allowed to leave the place that they're born into. This is one of the,
what if they own property in that place? Like, what if they inherit property? Would you take their property away?
It's not even clear that owning property is a universalizable concept in terms of how libertarians consider it. That is, other societies may have other conceptions of property that don't match what libertarians consider. But I think that we have to, if there's one thing that has to be universalizable where it actually would be merited to aggress against so to me, what we want is mutual respect between polities. And so polities can tolerate other polities having behavior we regard as very morally regressive or wrong, so long as those polities can respect our polities' ability to do the same kind of thing. There's a sort of strong sovereignty sort of, it's a going back to the classic, European idea of sort of strong nations that have independence between each other. But one of the few
democracy has gotten that for a larger part of the world I mean, maybe I should rephrase
Well,
that.
it's not clear that we have. It's not clear that we have that. It's not. I mean, right now there is tremendous interference from country to country to where if anyone tries to do something new, you have a sort of entire world order that will that will crush you. It's this idea that libertarians could even follow international law and do something outside of it. I think is just been proven false repeatedly. With the most recent example being, I'm so embarrassed I can never get his last name right, but there's this guy like Chad Eberwalky, Chad E, and I follow him on Twitter, and I need to memorize his last name. I get it wrong all the time, but he moved on to I don't know what you would call it, a sort of stand in international waters. He was following international.
Platforms.
Yeah, he went on to. Well, I think this was a new platform. Maybe it was one that was already in international waters.
Was this a micronation or something?
Yeah, he was in the waters of Thailand.
Yep.
And Chad L. Wartowski is his name. Chad L. Wartowski. And he was chased out of his platform by the government of Thailand at the request of the American government.
But that doesn't that's how international waters works.
No, he was in international. Well, so the point is we're not in this scenario where it's restaurant competition. You can't start a new government. You can't start anything that's in competition with the status quo. And so we're in something that the existing framework is already much closer to something like an oligopoly where there's a set number of providers who exclude any new providers from entering the market.
I actually think that we kind of can by creating. Well, I'm reading this. I'm rereading this book called Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. You've probably read it. I don't know. It's really good, but I feel like if not really creating a new government, but creating a structure that provides things that the government provides as an alternative, so that they are no longer depending on the government, and that kind of builds up as its own structure that could be a replacement.
Do you mean like the mafia?
Well, no,
they're an alternate
Fraternal
government.
Orders did this, but I do think that the mafia might actually have kind of branched off of that idea, because Italians were were very big into the lodges. So, but not the mafia as much, but I mean,
they are a functional alternative government. As somebody who lived in a mafia state,
yeah,
you can use the law or you can use the mafia. You have your two shopping areas. And to Jeremy's point, the mafia was much better than unorganized crime in terms of how they handled things. It improved their customer service because, I'm
kind of going less in the cop direction, though. I think that could potentially, that's plausible too, but more so benefits that you might get in regards to healthcare, things like that. Because that's what fraternal orders were really providing was
that
healthcare
could happen,
benefits and work,
you
and
have to
also
pay
if
into
you
it.
you pay a membership, but you're paying it consistently every month, regardless of if you're sick or not.
No,
And
what I'm
then-
saying is, to Jeremy's point and probably yours, in order to choose this alternate, you would want to stop paying into the U.S. government, which is not right now. Everything happens under that umbrella, so you're always paying
that's
all the things.
problem.
Right.
Well, I mean, yeah. So figuring out how to not pay into the U.S. government, it's a whole other can of worms. But one thing I wanted to the main reason why, because Jeremy, you've mentioned a lot on Twitter that you are a right-wing progressive.
Yes. Yeah.
What is that? Can you explain what that means? Because I don't know. I might be too, but I can't. I'm trying to figure it out if I am.
I can't. I refuse to explain what it means.
What?
All right, I'll explain what it means. Okay, so here's how I use both these terms. So I use right wing and left wing mostly as this egalitarian axis. So left wing's egalitarian, universalist. Sort of everyone is the same, equal moral worth. That's left wing. Right wing is more okay with human differences, inegalitarian, hierarchy, differences between people. That's how I use left and right. Conservative
So not
versus
an economic, does that kind of Because I look at left and right as an economic dichotomy.
It relates to economics because the left wants people to be equal, and redistribution is a way of making people equal. But it also explains stuff like trans stuff, because trans is a way of creating equality between various statuses. And so if you see this as like leftism is all about, there are differences between people, they're real. And so the leftist psychology is very much motivated by making those differences more equal. And so what are the ways in which we can, so let's tear down the family because there's people without families. This is a way of making these groups more equal, this kind of thing. And so to me, it's about, this is how I see left, right, is like left, and the more left you are, the more you want everyone to be equal, regardless of anything. The more, and I'm not saying you can't go too right. I'm not saying like right is correct. You can go as right as possible, but the more right you are, the more you are okay with sort of differences in power, differences in ability, these kinds of things between people, influence, resources, and so on. And that's left, right. Conservative versus progressive is how much do you want to keep things as they are versus change them. So there is a very strong argument for conservatism. The best argument for conservatism in the world, in my opinion, is the sort of Chesterton's fence argument, which is this idea that like civilization and human order are precious. We don't necessarily understand how we manage to achieve them, and so we should be careful in how we mess with the status quo because what we have is rare, given human history. That's the best argument for conservatism, in my opinion, that exists. Progressives, though, are people who say, well, we don't care. We're going to change things. We'll radically change the existing order. Much better worlds are possible than the current world, and so we're okay with changing things, fairly substantially. And so that's why I'm a right-wing progressive.
I do think the vast majority of what I would consider the Democratic Party to be incremental progressivism, like the people who initially voted for like Joe Biden were probably on the side of like, yeah, progressivism is good, but we should be doing it, like centrists, and the people who vote that way. Whereas I agree that like I actually like when conservatism is paired with progressivism, but not when you're standing still. Like conservatism to stand still and not move feels worse than pushing on the brake when the people who are on the gas pedal are going too fast or too far. Like I want conservatism to rein in too many changes too quickly. I want conservatism to rein in too much spending on things that are untested. To me, what I feel conservatism tries to do now is more like dig in and be obstinate and change nothing, or basically allow nothing to be changed.
Yeah, as someone who's pro-competition, I'm not anti-conservative. I think it would have been great to like freeze a couple of American cities in like the 1960s, and we should see it, or let's see how they compete. We should be performing experiments.
I mean, I'm also keen to that kind of thinking. I wouldn't want to do it there's ways to do it, and I hate that it's kind of done in the private market. Like I hate when a billionaire takes over a town and is like, oh, I'm gonna do all these scholarships and look how much better the things go up. But also I think the palatability politically for experimenting on cities. To me, though, I want to come back to the point where you talked about like destroying the family because others don't have it. And I think that any structure that is tearing down to make equal is an incorrect approach. And in fact, we should be. I mean, I don't have a problem with tearing down in certain aspects, usually economic from extreme high wealth holders and resource holders. But I like the idea, instead of saying like, I want us to recognize, oh, you have good things. Let's try to encourage other people to have some level of that as well, which I think is the goal of most like.
Are you tax the rich type?
I'm gonna eat the rich.
Oh my God. Okay.
Well, that's a big difference there, because I think the eat the rich types are motivated by the sort of that leveling impulse. I'm not. So I'm obviously right wing, which means that I express hostility towards the left. But I will say that there are some people on the left, like to me the test is, can you appreciate markets? Because if you're a sincere leftist, if you actually care about this is where, what do I mean by sincere leftist? To me, the sincere leftists don't like markets because what they actually care about is flattening hierarchies. But there's some leftists who take the left statements at face value, who are like, well, we care about the poor, we care about the disadvantaged. And there's some sincere autistic people who are like, well, if you care about the poor and disadvantaged, then did you know about this thing called markets that will help the poor and disadvantaged? And even if you want to help the poor and disadvantaged, we should still use markets and do redistributions and do transfer payments. And you'll see these kinds of like smart people, because these are the correct answers, by the way. Like if you want to help the poor, if you said all I care about is the poor's standing in the world, that that they're not starving, that they have a roof or whatever, you would use markets, right? Markets outperform any other solution to any other problem. You always use a market. Why does the left hate markets? Right, the left does hate markets. I don't think this is a controversial thing.
So, I mean, as somebody who considers to be on the left and I like markets, I think that there's. So here's.
I thought you're like a moderate though.
So I'm a
Right?
centrist.
Well, I don't know actually. Sometimes
So
you
keep
more Tommy this year.
My day-to-day politics are very centrist. Like I said, incremental progressivism, and I like tweaking numbers slowly because I don't want to see huge changes and these massive swings back and forth. But I'm also the kind of person who will easily be radicalized in the right circumstances. So, that's a whole separate thing. But I want to talk about an example where Detroit had a local policy where there was a lot of empty houses and there were a lot of homeless people. And they were going to hey, why don't we give the homeless people these houses and then they will take care of them. And so we have no homeless people. We'll have less homeless people, and we'll have less decrepit, decaying houses. It's a win.
I bet you had less homeless people, but they did not. I promise you, they did not take care of them. They
No,
did
they
not.
did this
nobody
in
gave-
LA.
nobody-
No, they did
That's
this in
not
LA
how it
where
happened.
they gave up
They-
those little mini houses.
The people who owned the houses voted against it. So they
Yes.
didn't even get a
Okay, but this is the kind of thing we're like, look, if you are on the street homeless, you did not. That wasn't one mistake. That was a dozen mistakes. You blew through every friend. You failed a number. You didn't end. You don't go from missing one rent payment to on the street. You missed a year's worth of rent payments, and then also you lied to your friends and family and everyone in your social network, and you cheated them too. And
It's either
only
mental
now,
illness or drugs, usually, right?
and
So-
only now did you end up on the street.
So, but I guess for the moral blank of me is how many people, let's say we had 10,000 homeless and 10,000 houses. How many success stories in that experiment would you need for you to feel like it was worth it?
Yeah, we're probably going to disagree on this one, but I don't know. It's
Because I wouldn't expect it to be a large number either. But what's the win?
So also it depends. I mean, there's no abstract answer here because it's entirely we're not voting on this policy, so it would depend on what what I'm contributing it to or whatever. I obviously would agree that marginality is real. So I'm a realist. Marginality exists no matter what. So at the margin, there's always going to be some people if you give every homeless person a house, there's clearly going to be at the margin some for whom that was all they needed, to get their life, back on track or whatever. But I think we face, and this is a tough reality and kind of a new reality, but we have, in my opinion, a pretty substantial, sort of American underclass that is either incapable or unwilling or too addicted to drugs or whatever. And I'm not saying this is maybe it's 5%. It's it's about as many as there are libertarians, and which is why it makes more sense to pander to their votes. But these, these people are you're not going to get anything out of these people. And they're not going to contribute to society. They're just going to be a drag on everything around them. And I'm not saying therefore they deserve any specific outcome, but I certainly don't think they deserve, things from their neighbors, or from America at large. And as far as I can tell, this population is only getting bigger. And this is a problem. We have a massive welfare state that basically encourages an underclass to have more and more children, and a lot of them are retarded or criminal or whatever. And not all of them, obviously. I'm sure, by the way, again, it's all a numbers game. Some very tiny portion of them are gonna end up being upstanding citizens and great people. We judge everyone as individuals, so I'd never write someone off due to their zip code or their parents or whatever. But like, this is, these trends are real, and part of what we're seeing, with everything that's happening is the outcome of all this stuff, I think.
And I mean, I do agree with that, and I think the welfare state is the wrong direction, and it's a continually growing problem in the wrong direction. But I don't like, to me, what a properly functioning welfare state should look like is some sort of machine that ekes out some measure of value. Like, it's not the government owned factories where it's like, if you're on the street, you go here, they'll have you sit in front of a fucking, stamp press. You pull the thing, you get your food, you get your entertainment. Maybe they give you your fucking heroin. I don't know. But
I think that's what the free market would produce. Like, you have these people, like, they're disagreeable. They're lacking in, skills or whatever. They're not going to respect their local environment unless they're sort of mandated or forced to. And it's like, well, I could see the free market producing systems that would get useful things out of these people, but it'd be things that would be regarded as like very dystopian. It would be it'd be like kind of like, what you're saying. So it's like, well, if you regard that as dystopian, like, it's either that or they're literally a drain. Like,
that's where I think it always feels like we're so close. Like, to me, take that thing, that free market solution, that in order to make the numbers work, it has to be very dystopian, and then just infuse like taxpayer money until this collectively 95% of people don't feel bad about it. Like, it doesn't.
But I don't see how that system works itself out over time. Like, you can't be just increasing your population of people who need subsidies.
Well, so if you stop tethering the benefits to procreation, that should solve itself. And in fact, like, it's one of those things where, like, I'm never gonna. It's horrible that there was, unacknowledged, like, forced sterilizations happening by the U.S. government. But that kind of incentivization is something that's fine when you have a structure of, like, listen, like, but to me, that's a long form. Like, I want there to be safety nets that allow people. I've been homeless. Like, that's a thing that's happened to me. And then obviously I'm not homeless anymore and I'm doing well, but it is there's an aspect of things can go wrong because I was young and stupid.
I also want there to be safety nets, but I don't believe that I think safety nets, which is what I think Jeremy's also saying, I do think safety nets can be created from the market. I think that they're like voluntary associations within communities, and
charity
we could say not charity. I mean, there are other ways to make that work, but it does require some level of community, which I think is the one thing that we're lacking, is that we don't really have kind of a global tribe, but people don't really have as much of a local tribe that really comes to support them.
I think what it ultimately requires, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable, including both the libertarians and the leftists, is it requires, I think it requires right-wing solutions, which means accepting that there are these differences between people, and accepting, to me, the right-wing libertarian solution of voluntary authority, which is that you can, if a church was allowed to go up to that addict, in the throes of their addiction and say, sign this contract to promise to stay in our church for 3 months. These are not the kinds of solutions that the free market is allowed to provide, right? These people aren't allowed to even assent to things that might help them. And so they're potentially because let's be honest, like, if you are in and I actually have a not zero familiarity with some of some people in these kinds of places. There's no getting through that without essentially maybe a week, maybe several weeks of sort of a real commitment. You can't do that. There's no contract you can sign. Even if you were going into private treatment, not a church, you can still walk out. Like it's actually not valid. There's no way that you can even contract to commit yourself to certain kinds of treatment. And so it's the government who stops all kinds of various potential treatment mechanisms.
So I feel like prevention is the best cure here.
Yeah, mental health,
Like-
supporting
like-
mental health institutions would probably
Like in
fix a lot
regards
of
to
these
just
problems,
like
but-
homeless people in general, and like a lot of them, I do think it's drug related, but then there is a lot that has to do with mental health as well. But I do think it's like, how do we prevent that from happening? Because at the point of where we're at right now, I don't like what the solutions are.
Yeah, that's a good. We need better memes, and this is another one where I can blame the government because the government froze religion in time. You can't make new religions anymore, and so we don't have because right. The best solution to the drug problem or the porn problem or the whatever the right wing or whoever people are saying would be memes, right? Like if I don't care to put the drug in my body or if I don't care to consume the harmful product because I've been hermetically persuaded that I don't want it, like that's the best solution. So then we don't need the government at all. So you need better memes. But again, the government is involved in meme competition, so you can't. Like
the
you
government
couldn't
doesn't
go.
let us get high on life. I know.
Well, not
Well,
even
right,
just, when you say memes, like, and you're saying like starting new religions or anything like that, technically you can do that.
Well, if
But-
if I wanted to go around to homeless people and say that if you like swear your soul to my lizard god, I will get you off heroin. I can't do that tax free because my religion would get shut down by the government, and this is a problem, right? Like a religion is just a meme complex. And so, like, we need competing meme complexes to keep people off of porn or heroin or video games or whatever. And, like, all the old meme complexes are tax deductible, but any new meme complex doesn't get to compete because you can't be a religion. Like, libertarianism should be a religion, but it's not allowed to be, And so, by the way, I'm just bullshitting here a little. I'm not saying I believe everything I'm saying.
well, I was gonna say like not just religion, but I think it's like anything that gives people meaning. Like I think that's kind of going back to like what I said with like community, like creating social bonds, like all of these things, like that's what gives people meaning. I think the lack of meaning that people are feeling right now, a lot of people, which is what people kind of seek in drugs, is a sense of meaning. Or they're bored.
Do you think that needs to be tied to national pride?
Patriotism?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the old fraternities really pushed that, actually. It was a huge part. Patriotism and making people care about their country.
Whether it's patriotism or religion, like the thing that these things have in common is that they provide something transcendent to us. They provide us a set of beliefs, a meme it's something that's larger than ourselves. We feel that we're part of something larger than ourselves, that we're contributing to some larger whole, and that we're at times even subsumed by this larger whole and this larger cause. This is a very, very natural part of our psychology. It's something that we crave. This is why you could strip religion from people and they will recreate it. And so, I think this is something, and there are some libertarians who have deprived themselves of these kinds of things and replaced this desire with libertarianism.
Yeah, that's problematic. I'm gonna in 10 years, y'all see. I'm gonna have a really highly functioning pragmatic frat cult. It's gonna be great.
I think you should be a cult leader. I think.
It's gonna happen. Don't worry.
Technically, she is Cult of Art. Twice a year.
It's on its way. It's on its way. I'll start a cult soon. It's gonna be great, but it's gonna be like a frat cult.
Can I be the anti here? Can I be your Lucifer?
No. What? Like
No?
what does that even mean?
I don't know. The fallen.
No, you don't need a villain.
Oh, come on!
No villain.
Every myth has
But
a
actually,
good
most of the fraternities that these like fraternal orders, they all like the number one thing that they all had. It wasn't like that some of them were like denominational, where they were like you had to be Catholic or you had to be Protestant, but most of them were just like you had to believe in a supreme being. Like it was very vague. Like that was like the religious requirement. Believe in a supreme being. So, you know, I'm gonna start a cult. It's gonna be great. Jeremy, thank you for coming on. This was a fun conversation. Do you got stuff that you want to promote? Things?
No, not really. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, but I don't care if you do. You can follow me. My full name it's Jeremy Kaufman, and I post things on there regularly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
he's banger tweets. Rin, you have anything?
You know me. I'm just all
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
active on the
The
Twitter
one thing-
sphere.
Yeah, you just don't do anything. It's fine. The one thing I do, like, even when I disagree with you, Jeremy, I still like respect your opinion, which is, you know, that's always a good thing. Because there's some people where I disagree with them, but I just think they're retarded. But like, I don't think you're retarded when I disagree with you. It's just more of like semantics.
Yeah, I try so hard to get people to think I'm retarded, and you won't even call me a retard on your own show.
I mean, listen, you have occasional moments, but it's
You know,
rare.
I thought we were gonna be friends, but now you won't call me a retard.
Is that what do you want me to call you a retard? I can do that for you. Yeah, so bye everybody. I will be playing video games later tonight. First Ascendant, come hang out. And thank you so much, Jeremy. We'll have to have you on again to talk soon. Maybe something more provocative, I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't disagree with much of what was going on here. So